Fine. It was Vanessa. She feels you're possessive. Okay? She feels you hold your money over our heads. She warned me that if we ever stood up to you, you'd do exactly this. You'd try to ruin us to punish us. And you know what? She was right. My God, you proved her right. The final nail in the coffin. They hadn't just reacted to my actions. They had been coached to expect them. Vanessa hadn't just pushed me out. She had written the script for my villainy. And my own mother had handed me the part. A strange cold peace settled over me. The pain was still there, but it was distant now, like a star that had died years ago, but its light was just reaching me. Thank you, Mom, I said, my voice empty of all emotion. You've made everything perfectly clear now. I hung up before she could reply. An hour later, my father called back. His voice was no longer angry. It was the voice of a general giving an order. There will be a family meeting Friday night at the house. Your Aunt Carol and Uncle Mike will be here. You will attend. We are going to put an end to this nonsense once and for all. Okay, I said, the single word feeling powerful on my tongue. I'll be there. There are a few things I'd like to put an end to as well. As I hung up the phone, I looked at the old manila folder sitting on my desk. My heart was a stone in my chest, but my mind was a sharp, clear diamond. The intervention was coming, and I was going to be ready. The 2 days leading up to Friday were surreal. My phone, which for years had been a constant source of summons and requests, fell completely silent. It was an unnerving quiet, the deep breath a predator takes before it strikes. I knew they were coordinating, strategizing with Aunt Carol as their lead counsel. They were preparing their speeches, honing their points of attack, all designed to make me feel small, guilty, and ungrateful. They were building a cage of familial obligation. And on Friday night, they intended to lock me inside it. They had no idea I was busy forging the key. On Thursday afternoon, I walked into the hushed wood-paneled office of Howard Davis. Mr. Davis was a throwback to another era. He wore a tweed jacket. His white hair was neatly combed, and his office smelled of old paper, leather, and quiet competence. He had been my family's lawyer for decades. Back when my father was a man who valued integrity over image, he'd stepped away from handling their affairs a few years ago, citing a desire to semi-retire, but I knew it was because he didn't like the direction my father was heading. He greeted me with a firm handshake and sad, knowing eyes. James, it's been too long. When your name popped up on my schedule next to the words partnership agreement, I had a feeling this wasn't just to say hello. I sat in the heavy leather chair across from his imposing mahogany desk. I slid the folder across the polished surface. Howard, I need to know everything. No ambiguities. I need to know exactly what this document empowers me to do. He didn't need to read it. He simply opened it, his fingers finding the key pages by instinct. He was the architect of this document after all. He looked up at me over the top of his reading glasses. Do you remember that day, James, the day we drew this up? He asked, his voice gentle. Vaguely, I admitted. I just remember I was desperate to stop my dad from losing the hardware store. I would have signed anything. I know, he said with a sigh. And that's precisely why I drew it up this way. Their father wanted you to give him the $80,000 as a gift. When I refused, he wanted it structured as a loan with a low interest rate. I refused that too. He leaned forward, his expression intent. James, in my 40 years of practicing law, I've seen more families torn apart by money than by anything else. I saw the dynamic. I saw how much you gave and how much they took. I knew that one day they would push you too far. This document. This wasn't just a legal agreement. It was a life raft. I was just hoping you'd see it before you drowned. His words hit me harder than any of my family's accusations. He, a near stranger, had seen my reality more clearly than I had. The 51 controlling stake is ironclad, he continued, tapping a paragraph with his finger. You are the majority partner. You have the deciding vote on all financial matters, all operational decisions, and the hiring and firing of all personnel, including and especially minority partners. The weight of those words settled on me. So, the new business, the gift shop, is legally a subsidiary of the original Wilson & Sons Enterprise Corporation. You own 51 of all of it. The name, the inventory, the lease on the property. All of it. I finally understood. I wasn't just a silent partner. I was the silent owner. They're holding an intervention for me on Friday night, I said, the word tasting absurd on my tongue. Mr. Davis allowed himself a thin, grim smile. Are they? It sounds more like an unscheduled shareholders meeting to me. He leaned back. So, what do you intend to do, James? I'm going to attend their intervention, I said, my voice hard as steel. But I need ammunition. I need a formal declaration on your letterhead, notarized and stamped. Something that summarizes my legal position in language so simple even a child can understand it. I need something they can't argue with. That is an excellent idea, he said, already reaching for his dictaphone. It will be a pleasure to draft. He can pick it up tomorrow morning. I'll have my secretary notarize it herself. I walked out of that office and into the late afternoon sun, feeling like my spine had been replaced with steel. That evening, as promised, my cousin Emma showed up at my door. She didn't come empty-handed. She brought a six-pack of my favorite IPA and a pizza. They sat on my living room floor, eating straight from the box. So, she said after a long, comfortable silence. How are you really? I told her everything about the call with Mr. Davis, about the 51 stake. Her eyes widened. Oh my God, James, you've been holding the winning hand this whole time and didn't even know it. I think I knew, I confessed. I just never wanted to play the hand. Because you hoped you'd never have to, she finished for me, nodding. I get it. She grew quiet for a moment, tracing a pattern on her beer bottle. You know this dynamic? It started a long time ago. I remember one of Tyler's birthday parties when we were kids. Maybe he was turning 10. My mom had baked a big chocolate cake. Your mom cut the slices and she gave Tyler this huge corner piece with a giant frosting rose on it. And she gave you this tiny sliver from the middle because, and I quote, James doesn't mind. He's such a good boy. The memory so small and insignificant landed with surprising pain. A tiny sliver of cake. A text message uninviting me from dinner. It was the same story, just with more zeros attached. You need to be prepared, James, Emma said, her voice serious. They will try to make this about your character. They'll call you broken, cold, selfish. They'll try to gaslight you into thinking you're the crazy one. I know, I said. Let them try. When she left later that night, she gave me a fierce hug at the door. You are not a sliver of cake, James, she whispered in my ear. You are the whole damn bakery. Don't you ever forget that. I closed the door. The warmth of her words a welcome shield. The intervention was less than 24 hours away. The board was set. The pieces were in place. And I was finally ready to make my move. The drive to my parents' house on Friday night felt like moving through a dream. The familiar turns of the neighborhood. The oak tree I crashed my bike into when I was 7. The basketball hoop above the garage. It was all part of a life that no longer felt like mine. I parked on the street, not in the driveway. It was a small act of separation, but it felt important. In my hand, I clutched a crisp new manila folder. It felt less like paper and more like a shield. I rang the doorbell, and the door swung open almost immediately, as if my father had been waiting right behind it. James, he said, his voice a low rumble. You're here. Get in. I stepped into the house, and the scene was exactly as I had pictured. They were assembled in the living room, a tribunal waiting for the accused. My father took his usual seat in the large, overstuffed leather armchair, his throne. My mother was perched on the edge of the sofa, a crumpled tissue in her hand, her face a mask of sorrowful duty. Next to her, Tyler and Vanessa sat so close they looked like a single entity. Tyler's arm was draped possessively around her, and he glared at me as if I were something he'd scraped off his shoe. And holding court in a dining chair that had been awkwardly placed to complete the circle was Aunt Carol, my father's sister. Her lips were pursed into a thin, disapproving line, and her eyes ran over me, cataloging my faults. You're late, my father grunted. It was his opening salvo. I'm on time, I replied calmly, glancing at my watch. I chose to remain standing, a solitary figure before the seated counsel. Sit down, James, he commanded, gesturing with his head toward the single, empty wooden chair they had placed directly opposite them, all the interrogation chair. I complied, the legs of the chair scraping slightly against the hardwood floor. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating, thick with years of unspoken resentment. My father leaned forward, his hands clasped over his knee.